Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for this masterclass on Galactic Markets. I'm Bijan Malecki, and I'm joined by Galactic Markets co-founder Alan Vay. Alan, thanks for joining us. How are you doing today?
Thanks for having me. I'm all good, man. It's great to be here to talk a little bit about Galactic.
Yeah, I'm super excited about this conversation. I know our community definitely is as well. And, before we get into it, I want to congratulate you and everyone at Galactic Markets on your new partnership with Sports Illustrated. Ever since I can remember, they've been the biggest sports publication in the US. And we'll definitely get to that later. Want to talk about, what that does and what SI predicts is and everything like that. But, we'll have plenty of time to get into that. But before we get too ahead of ourselves, we like to ask everyone about their background and how they got into Web3. So, Alan, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey?
Yeah, for sure. I'm I guess, technologist by training. I started undergrad in computer science at Imperial College in London. And that's where I first came across Bitcoin. This was sort of 2012. I finished up in 2015. I did a master's in artificial intelligence. AI wasn't as hot as it is these days back then. And during that master's, I ended up doing my thesis on film rights distribution on the blockchain. I got financing right out of uni on that and started building businesses in the space. So Aventus was my first business. We did an ICO in 2017, raised like 60,000 Ether in a few minutes, and we're part of that craziness. And I've kind of been involved in building out a variety of different businesses in the Web3 space since.
And that brings us to today and Galactic Markets. So, why don't you tell us a little bit about Galactic Markets? What do you guys do?
Yeah, Galactic Markets is very much focused on enterprise and specifically media prediction markets. So it's a B2B technology provider, white label prediction market technology provider, and it's focused on media publications. So the first one is obviously Sports Illustrated, as we mentioned. And the key thesis here is in a world where information, truth is harder and harder to come by, right? We've got generative AI these days that can generate content faster, to some degree better than some humans. And you can then optimize fake news with AI systems, and they spread way better as it is. Any fake news travels around the world faster than real news, right? So, in a world where the media industry is facing this kind of existential threat, getting to the truth and having a monetization strategy for the truth is more important than ever. And that's what Galactic has kind of been founded to achieve. Deliver the ability for media agencies or media companies to get back to the fundamentals of what they're about, delivering the truth and generating a new revenue stream for them in doing so. And that's what prediction markets enable.
So yeah, we're definitely going to dive into that because I have a few questions about, kind of what the use cases are beyond, something like we traditionally see in prediction markets. But I want to stick with the prediction market aspect of it for a second here. So, because, in Web3, and with the rise of prediction markets, I've noticed that we use it interchangeably with, casinos and gambling. But can you tell us, I know you touched on this a little bit briefly, but can you tell us a little bit more about how this is different than, a traditional casino or sports book?
Yeah, so with a prediction market, essentially it's on any possible event. So you could create a prediction market on, is it going to rain tomorrow? And then you need to clearly agree on the what's called resolution criteria, right? So how do we actually determine who gets to say if it did rain tomorrow or not? If it drizzled, does that count? If there was no thunderstorm, does that count? So you really got to get into the details of what source are we checking, who is allowed to report on what the ultimate truth and the resolution of the market is. That's one of the big problems to be addressed that we can get into later. Once you've specified that criteria, you open up a market, and you can think of it more like a futures contract or a binary option. So if from a kind of financial asset perspective or instrument perspective. So now we open a market and it starts at, let's say, 50% probability. So it costs 50 cents to buy yes outcome tokens, and it costs 50 cents to buy no outcome tokens. Now, if the market resolves to yes, a yes outcome token is worth $1 and a no outcome token is worth $0, and vice versa. So essentially, this prediction market really trades as a probability. It's going to trade between 0 and $1, and it represents the probability that the collective crowd intelligence believes this event is going to happen or not. So let's say it costs 80 cents to buy a yes outcome token on is it going to rain tomorrow? That means the market is pricing it at an 80-cent probability that it will rain tomorrow. But the market starts kind of at you can start it anywhere, but let's say you started at 50-50. And then as people buy yes or no outcome tokens, the price of that market is going to change and ultimately reflect the kind of crowd intelligence or crowd perspective on the probability of that event occurring.
One thing I'm always fascinated on is how these, kind of opening lines or opening probabilities are created. Like what determines whether, something's going to open with a 70% probability of yes versus 30% probability of no. Like I understand that once it opens and people start making their predictions, it'll change based off of where people are predicting. But how do you determine how that line or how that prediction opens?
Now, this is another key element to where it changes compared to gambling or a casino or whatnot, right? Your former point. There's no kind of bookmaking or giving people probabilities on something, amending those probabilities, having a spread or any of those kind of notions. It's anybody can come and provide liquidity in a market. Now, what that means, you can think of it as sort of traditional market making. That's very similar, or for the Web3 users, like decentralized exchanges like Uniswap. Essentially, somebody will come in and say, I'm willing to put in $100,000 around this probability on the yes and the no front. And then they will buy yes and no outcome tokens in a particular ratio at that price to ensure that their position is covered. So it's essentially the market makers, the liquidity providers, who determine where that opening probability will come in. And yeah, then the beauty of these platforms is it's not just the operator of the platform that adds liquidity. Any third party is able to add liquidity and participate and make sure that you've got a genuine representation of where the market should open.
Okay, so now like the Web3 and the blockchain part of this is starting to make a lot more sense. But can you talk about like why something like this may be better to be used in Web3 than opposed to going down the more traditional Web2 style of a product or service?
I think the great debate often that you see with people, right, is blockchain just a solution looking for a problem? Because in so many use cases that people have used the technology, it's been more buying a flashy press release with a flashy brand rather than focusing on the fundamentals of the technology adding value. Now, I think prediction markets are a beautiful case to show this could not have been done without the blockchain, because this technology is nothing new. The economic theory is nothing new. The wisdom of the crowd, collective intelligence, this has been studied in economics for decades and proven that it is the case. The reason prediction markets have only emerged in the last few years is because of blockchain technology and specific properties of blockchain technology. People have tried these prediction markets kind of in closed source environments over the last decades, but they never took off. And the problems were the lacking transparency, the inability to really see what the crowd believed, the ability to manipulate the opinions of the crowd based on financial interest of the business operating the prediction markets, meant that this tool was never a powerful indicator of the truth. It more converged just on traditional betting or casinos, where the company operating it was just making money off of people trying to bet. With blockchain, every single vote, every single outcome token that is purchased in the market, everybody can transparently see. Nobody can tamper with that. As the world evolves, as we now see clouds rolling in today, everybody can change their positions. Everybody has access to the same information, and there is perfect information. So this has led to a system that people can trust. And finally, I guess the economic theories have proven true that the wisdom of the crowd is much closer to the truth than any individual. I mean, we saw this in the US elections, right? Polymarket, who's one of the biggest players in this space, had way more accurate data than any of the polling data and any of the betting books. And they had this 3 weeks before the election closed. They had everything perfectly accurate down to the kind of individual states. So there've been some big success cases already where we see this economic theory coming true because of the technology.
Yeah, you mentioned something like that in a recent interview that I watched too, and that really stuck with me when you said that crowd intelligence is greater than, the individual intelligence. And I love how you just kind of noted that this can be used beyond just like, the traditional prediction markets that we know, but like also for something like polling in a presidential race, right? So I guess we touched on that, but what are like some other use cases that, in media that people can use to help, I guess, their audience get a more accurate representation of what's going on? Like obviously polling was really like just such a killer use case, but is there like something else that, beyond that we're missing here or that we haven't yet seen?
Well, I think we're gonna be on a bit of a journey of discovery, but the key thing to think here is obviously media publications have so much data around what people are looking at, reading, what they're interested in, right? Their whole business is trying to figure out what that next article is. So think of the kind of symbiotic relationship between knowing the content people are really engaging with, creating prediction markets on that basis, but also some exploratory ones, and then seeing what's hot from a prediction perspective and generating your content on that basis. So one thing we were spitballing, I can't mention the particular client, but one of the major US publications, an interesting element they were looking at is investigative journalism. So how do you get people to surface, when you have like a source, how do you incentivize people to be a source for these kind of markets? Well, if you were to create a fund or make it available to individuals who knew the right answers and they put their money where their mouth is, they would bet heavily on something because they knew the truth. So if they were to take a major position, you would be much more likely to believe what they were saying than otherwise. Then you can even look in the world of artificial intelligence, right? So more and more agents are just roaming around the planet. How do you differentiate the quality of these agents, the trustfulness of these agents, how they've been designed and developed, and how they're going to perform? Again, you can create a prediction market around people for due diligence, predict the diligence associated with this agent or this business or this article. There's so many interesting ways in which this kind of technology can be applied that we haven't even scratched the surface of
Mhm.
yet.
Yeah, it seems like sky's the limit here, and as we kind of progress, it seems like new use cases and new opportunities will arise from this. So I want to kind of take a little bit of a step back and kind of talk about where Galactic Markets fits in this. Because with you mentioned the popularity of Poly Market, and they absolutely blew up during the 2024 election, and then we've recently seen the launch of Myriad prediction markets, and most recently, Robinhood also announced their intention to enter the prediction market space. So can you tell us why Galactic Markets, and how do you guys think you stand out from some of the other players in this space?
Absolutely. So the focus for Galactic on the media industry is one of the big differentiators, right? So B2B, where many others have to build, let's look at Polymarket, for example. They have to build a user base organically from scratch. There's not any major partnerships there, and they've done very successfully in that so far, but they only have 100,000 monthly active users. It's very small by technology platform metrics. And they're going to have to continue on that organic journey, and they'll probably be the destination site in terms of the B2C experience, the kind of capture it all, right? Should we say the Amazon of selling online? That's that kind of corner that people are looking at. But then you have the enablers, the tech enablers to enable third parties. The media companies, like we said, they have the data and they have the users. They're just looking for a different means of monetizing. So the strategy in going after existing market incumbents and enabling them to create new revenue streams for existing audiences is a very different user onboarding strategy. And that's one of the key differentiators for Galactic in that respect.
Mm.
Then there's a regulatory question as well. You see markets like Polymarket are not offered onshore US. They've had some troubles in the past, obviously, with the CFTC and various other aspects because of how they operated their market, primarily because anybody can just put forward a prediction market. Sometimes that's compliance, sometimes that moves into a territory that's difficult. And then how do you decide to close that market? That's where they've had some issues as well. So Galactic has tackled those 2 points where not anybody can put forward a prediction market on any of the Galactic clients' marketplaces. There's a compliance and regulatory board that'll review anything that's going onto the platform and ensure it adheres to the various standards of the different global territories where it'll go live. This means it can go live onshore US and various other territories where it's the biggest user base for Sports Illustrated. Then on the market resolution side, Galactic has partnered with the Truth Network to do all of the traffic on that blockchain. So this is a blockchain specifically focused on just prediction markets and the compliance thereof, and essentially has its own niche to ensure that big decentralized network of participants are involved in resolving the outcome of any prediction market. So decentralized, trustless, but with an economic system that has proven valuable in actually resolving these markets. So I think those 3 points are some of the elements I can probably talk all day on because it's a new market, right? But I think those are the 3 most impactful elements where Galactic differentiates itself.
Absolutely. So let's transition into the B2C aspect of what you guys do. So, you guys recently announced a partnership with Sports Illustrated, huge publication, right? I've been reading them since I was a kid. But you have something SI Predict with Sports Illustrated. Can you tell us a little bit about what that partnership entails? Like, what is it going to do for people? And then also, I'm sure I know probably a bunch of our audience members are curious to know, like, how does a partnership like that work behind the scenes? Like, how do those conversations happen? How does something like that get across the line from, hey, we have this initial idea to all of a sudden we're collaborating on something? So why don't you tell us a little bit about SI Predicts and what you guys are doing there?
Yeah, so the SI Predict platform is obviously incredibly exciting. I mean, Sports Illustrated has at any time 50 to 70 million monthly uniques coming across their website, right? Like you said, one of the biggest publications in the world in sport, really, and been around for decades, right? And predates me, that's for sure. So really awesome brand. The way this deal comes together, and I have to give all the props to my kind of co-founder here, Stuart Stott. He had worked with so Sports Illustrated is owned by Authentic Brands Group, a major kind of licensing media brand house. And Stuart had previously worked with the guys as well as some of his investors. So they knew each other, and I think it's essentially right place, right time, as it often is with these kind of big deals, right? You've got to build the trust that we know what we're doing, we're credible in the space, we see the way the market is evolving before it happens. So the conversation around prediction markets started about 2 years ago, and it went back and forward, and it was a bit of a challenge. But when Polymarket blew up, it was clear that Galactic Markets is so on the forefront of understanding where the industry is going and knowing how to apply that. It really came with kind of great credibility. So building the trust, meeting everybody, making sure we had the credibility in the space, calling things before they happened, and otherwise just working really hard to build something exciting.
Fantastic. So what with SI Predict, like what type of stuff are we going to be able to do with that? Like what's the vision behind what that will ultimately be for, the end user and your business clients?
Yeah, so sipredict.com will be the Sports Illustrated prediction markets. This will host a variety of different sports. So you'll come onto the kind of main page, the markets page, and you'll be able to filter by football or basketball or whatever, right? And then each of those categories will have a variety of different markets that are available. Exactly what these markets are will be, to a degree, determined by what content is hot on Sports Illustrated itself. But we think there'll be a significant focus around the rumor mill, where players are going, transfers, things like this. An area that will not be covered by the platform is specific event outcomes. So, will this team win this game? That will not be hosted on the platform. You move into gambling territory when you start dealing with specific event outcomes. But everything else, game stats, who's showing up. Sorry, I've got a dog in the background here going crazy. Who's showing up? Will Taylor Swift be booed in the stadium? All of those kind of things, those will absolutely be featured in the market.
So yeah, I want to stick with that for a second there, because that stuff absolutely fascinates me. And during the election and even afterwards, I've been having a lot of fun kind of taking these futures predictions, if you will. But how do you determine? Like, I know you touched on it. A lot of this will be determined on based on what's trending on Sports Illustrated. But like, do you have any other, like, what other criteria goes into opening a specific market and determining kind of the futures people can take? Because I always like to say, on Polymarket or others, you see, for example, like, will Donald Trump say X? And then you have the yes or no on that. Or, what is the referee will give 3 yellow cards in this particular match, and that's a yes or no, or something like that. So can you tell us about a little bit of the criteria that goes into determining those markets beyond maybe just what's trending on Sports Illustrated or other places?
Absolutely. So obviously what's trending, what has historically performed very well, just forms a nice basis of the kind of pitch you're playing on. Then the compliance board. So obviously making sure that you just stay within that box that is completely compliant, good to go in the US and a variety of other territories. Then you've kind of narrowed down the state space of what you're going to search through. From there, a lot of this comes down to expertise, right? Especially Stuart's expertise, where he formerly worked at the Daily Mail. He's been building publications and involved in that kind of cycle for 15 years now. So understanding what people really get excited about, what that rumor mill is. I mean, he was involved in taking the Daily Mail from almost bankrupt to the biggest publication in the world at one point. And it was all about how they position content and how they got the rumor mill and everything working on that site. So some of it is just experience and base knowledge that Stuart has. And then leaning on a variety of different tools, right? We have different focus groups that we might poll. We obviously use generative AI to generate a bunch of different options and then try and whittle those down. So like often when you build a website, you do something called A/B testing, right? So one set of users gets the A version of the product and one set of users gets the B version. And then you see how people react to these. So a variety of different techniques, but the goal is to ultimately then deliver the best and most engaging content. And then you learn from that. You have an AI engine that sits in the background and learns which markets, when, based on what was happening, performed the best, and then helps you generate future ones that it thinks may or may not be kind of sexy for the public.
Right. So you're talking about AI, and I think it's a very interesting use case that AI has. Kind of impact how AI can impact the accuracy of these models, right? So can you talk a little bit more about how you guys do ensure the accuracy and fairness of these market resolutions, and maybe a little bit more about how AI can play into that?
So the AI will help select what the market should be or what we think will be a nice market to host for people and help review outcome criteria. Is this criteria specific enough? But there'll always be a human who does the final pass just because of the regulatory landscape. You've got to be very careful with these things at the moment. Maybe ultimately it'll be able to be automated, but we're not there today. In terms of the resolutions of the markets, this then comes down to, I think the truth network is the key element here. The truth network has 13,000 different validator nodes. So what this means is there are 13,000 different people running software on their computers that are involved in the process of checking the outcome and then reporting on that outcome. So similar to like the Bitcoin network, where you have all of these different miners all competing and then posting and everybody agreeing that, yep, that was the correct block. Let's move on to the next block. It's a similar thing with the truth network. So thousands and thousands of different people check the outcome and vote, oh, this is what I think the outcome was. Then there's an economic structure that makes sure that if they were right, they are rewarded for it. And if they were wrong, they're not rewarded for it. So this falls back to the fundamentals of blockchain technology. How do you achieve consensus across a wide group of people around the state of something? And that's one of the problems that blockchain has solved. So it's relying on that Web3 technology and the truth network specifically to ensure accurate resolution of event outcomes.
Now you mentioned you talked about regulators a little bit, and one thing that always fascinates me about regulators and the people involved with making these decisions is how little they actually know about technology. I remember a while back there was a congressional hearing about with Facebook and Google, and they were just having trouble just managing the concept of Facebook payments and how you make payments across these things. So I'm always fascinated on how you explain something like this, which is such a new type of market, to a regulator that's so, kind of, I guess, for lack of a better phrase, unaware of what technology really is. Like, how do you explain that and kind of convince them that, hey, this is a different market and it's different than, what you traditionally understand with how, a casino or a sports book and these things work? How does that conversation play out, and what difficulties have you had, kind of getting, I guess, regulators on board with something like this?
So in short, an army of lawyers, right? Like that, lawyers play the beautiful middleman job of translating the craziness of the tech world and making it formal and writing 500-page documents clearly outlining the rationale and the research. But in a bit more depth, right? I mean, Kalshi, you got to give a lot of props to them in the market. Kalshi is another prediction market player, and they were one of the first to launch in the US, and they launched for the election right before the election. And the CFTC, who's in charge of regulating futures or binary options contracts, tried to shut them down and kind of sent them a cease and desist. They went to court, they won, the CFTC appealed, and they won again. So Kalshi has very clearly set the precedence of what is allowed to happen in the US. And there's kind of significant legal background and reasoning as to why that's the case and why these things are compliant. So I think they've done the industry a big favor in kind of planting those initial seeds. And then from like any new entrant like Galactic Markets, it's having legal teams review all of that, review the various other participants that are entering the market. You mentioned Robinhood, a few others, right? Understanding what everybody's terms and conditions look like, the way everybody's structuring it, and then structuring in a very similar manner. So some of the elements that we can touch on if people are interested is running a non-custodial platform is very important. If you onboard or offboard from a crypto or fiat perspective, you are using licensed parties, globally licensed. So MoonPay is a great example of that. So there are a variety of different points on how you design the fundamental technology to ensure that you are compliant as much as possible where the rule frameworks are today. And then having just really great experts involved, right? A compliance team and people who can say, here's where we think this will go based on how things in the past went.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's a beautiful thing that you guys can be competitors, but still kind of work together to, kind of roll things out, or, use other people's groundwork to help yourself out. So you did talk about paying, and or payments rather, right? And I know we like to do this all for fun, but we also want to, kind of make a little bit of profits. So how does that part of it work? Like how do I place a prediction? How, if my prediction ends up being right, how am I rewarded for that? And vice versa, if I'm wrong, how am I don't want to say penalized, but how does that part play out? Like how does that work when I'm, going around on that? Do you have to connect the wallet? Is it like with crypto based? Like how can you talk us through how that works?
Yeah, so as you can imagine, with a brand like Sports Illustrated, this has to work and it has to be nice. So The engineers, I think, to a degree, are a bit sad that so much of the cool innovations mean that you're basically hiding everything from the user, and nobody ever gets to marvel in the magic of your work. But it's as simple as you show up with a credit card like you would on any other site, you place your bets, and you take your money into your bank account. That's the simplest flow that the majority of the users will go through. If you are a crypto savvy user, you can absolutely show up with your wallet and you can place your bets with your wallet and you can leave and everything will be non-custodial the whole way through. Under the hood, what's really going on is any of the funds that come into the platform are transferred into a stable coin, into USDC, Coinbase's stable coin. Predictions are placed in the stable coin on the platform, so via the Galactic technology on the Truth network. When the market resolves, you get your tokens back, and when you check out into your bank account, those tokens are sold and they transferred into your bank account. But because you have amazing market participants like Coinbase or MoonPay or the various other these days, these processes have become really slick and nice and easy. So the user doesn't have to worry about anything other than what they would on any other platform they use on the internet.
Yeah, one thing like and I love that you said that because this really just to me this is like such a great way to, kind of I hate to say mass adoption because we've been talking about it and it's seemingly taking forever to come, but this is I think a great way to give exposure without, kind of giving too much to people that aren't so familiar with this and kind of just bring the masses in. But with that comes the question of security and safety, as does all things in Web3. This is a question that's always kind of in the background of all of our minds. So, what are what are measures that you guys are using to secure user funds, personal data, and things like that?
Absolutely. So, well, let's start with the team, right? You need to have people who know this. So the kind of chief technology in charge of this, a guy called Andre Brosco, he was formerly at Oracle, the kind of big, the Silicon Valley Oracle, and in charge of cybersecurity there for a variety of their products. Spent a decade working at Oracle, and then built R3 Corda. If anybody knows what that is, that's the kind of banking consortium. Many of the biggest banks came together to kind of build that enterprise blockchain, and Andre was in charge of rolling out that product. So both from traditional technology and Web3 technology, he's had to work with some of the biggest institutions on securing major enterprise networks. So Andre's experience is key to the security that is set up in these systems. It starts with process, right? How are you deploying things? Where are you deploying them? How are you setting up and dealing with user keys or any of this? The biggest thing in crypto is obviously somewhere along the line there is a private key, a password generated that allows you to move your funds around. So employing technologies that ensure it's non-custodial, the customer is always in the possession of their assets, but if they forget their password or if they're compromised, their safeguards in place, that all comes down to kind of standard software development practices that you learn at these major enterprises. So that's one element. And then it's education, right? The weakest point in any technology system is typically the people. So it's making sure, I mean, if you look even at things like the Bybit hack, the people ultimately got compromised there. And so how do you ensure that people understand what they're doing? They're not randomly just sending their funds somewhere where they shouldn't, but also the staff involved, both at the publications and at the company Galactic itself, understand how the technology works, at least the security critical elements and procedures are put in place. Now, no system is ever 100% secure. The question is just, can you make it hard enough to attack relative to other targets? And that's the ultimate goal.
Yeah, I love that. I think it's definitely one of the most, it's not something that's super sexy to talk about, but it's definitely super important. So glad that you guys have that in mind when you're putting out something like this. So, and kind of with the safety, there's going to be people at all different levels, right? Of safe. There's going to be people coming in that are just learning about how to protect your funds. And then there are going to be people that have been doing it for a while, which kind of also brings me to the difference of users on your platform as well. I think on one end you have like people that are more casual that, see something like, an election 2024 elections market, and want to say, oh, well, Donald Trump say this about cats and dogs, and they want to just have some fun and take place in it, right? And then you have maybe the other side of it, where there are people that actually, have just so many types of statistics on this, have these different like Excel spreadsheets, and then are just really kind of taking this like a professional, right? So do you guys differentiate between those two? Do you guys have plans to kind of cater to these different types of users on your platform? Can you talk to us a little bit about how you think of the different users that are, going to be using your platform?
So, from a product kind of perspective, there are two key user personas that are considered in the platform. So, the one, and what we estimate to be the majority user, is going to be people who do not really know anything about it, are casual in placing bets, maybe $100 a month, nothing major, but just interested parties, normal readers of Sports Illustrated, normal people who watch sports and are like, no, I bet you my team's going to win, or I mean, obviously that's not going to be possible, but bet you this guy's going to get a red card or whatever sport you're following, right? That persona is very simple. You want to make I mean, I think everybody, even technical people, want something that's easy to use. So if you don't care and you're a simple user, you'll be able to just go through this flow. In your own account, you'll be able to access detailed data around your P&L position, where you entered, where you exited, trends in the different markets. So there will be an aspect of data for you to dig into for those users. And there will also be a Web3 aspect for people to dig into. If you really want to take security into your own hands, if you absolutely only want to use your wallet with your token, that's completely possible too. The platform is just a technology framework to facilitate you using these open source and decentralized technologies. So it kind of covers the spectrum, but the real focus is, even if you're an advanced user, you want it to feel simple and slick. So that's where the real focus has been placed. And you're going to have to dive a little deeper if you want to get some of the more advanced features, but they're available.
Yeah, that's great to hear. That has a little bit of something for kind of every type of user, or maybe a user can start as casual and kind of work their way up to, use some of these more advanced tools to help them with their predictions. So with that, and we did touch on this, there are a few different players in this market, right? So have you thought about, what's going to bring, the user? I know you guys are kind of more focused on, B2B, but have you thought about what's going to bring that individual user back? With Web3, one of the biggest things are, like fee structures, but more importantly, incentivization, right? I think that's a big thing in Web3 that we talk about. Have you guys considered how that's going to play out in making users, coming back to your particular platform every day as opposed to another one?
So the great thing here, and yes, this speaks to the product roadmap, right? So these users are recurring users of the publication. So they're going to be seeing this every time they read an article. The future vision, the roadmap, right, is ultimately to just have the Galactic widget available to any website. So where you currently plug in your ad spend, you can just plug in the Galactic widget. And what that's going to do is it's going to look at the content that's on the page. Whatever's being displayed on the page is going to use AI to ingest this. It's then going to look at all of the different markets available across the different Galactic client marketplaces. It's going to pick the top 3 that it thinks will engage with your content, and it'll display them live on the site there with the widget. So any user on any of this kind of long tail of the publications will be able to see, oh, I'm reading an article about the next election. I think this candidate's way more likely to win. Great. Let me place a little prediction there. So that widget being available all over, kind of like an ad model, aggregating the different places, will help touch users even when they're not on the publications.
Right. So like, for example, like let's just take fantasy football for an example. If I'm reading an article maybe on the top quarterbacks to draft for fantasy football, like maybe within that article on the Sports Illustrated site, there could be a little plugin, if you will, where I can say, I think, Pat Mahomes will finish number one in QB stats, for example. Am I on the right track there with something like that?
Exactly. And then you follow your local influencer and you check out his social media page, and there is a little widget there that allows you to then see where the live stats are. So the goal is to spread it as far and wide as possible for the ultimate roadmap of this.
Oh, fantastic. So I want to ask you, I mean, we talked a lot about a lot of, kind of things that you guys are doing with AI and, all of that. But I guess I kind of want to ask you high level, like, where do you think this industry is going in particular with the prediction markets? Like, what do you think the appetite is going to be from the general public? And what is the reaction you've been seeing yourself on things like this, whether that's from more casual people, or maybe whether that's from people that have experience doing something like this in, kind of the Web 2 world?
Yes. So from a user perspective, I think it's a very appealing way to enter into a market, right? The only way companies make money with gambling is if on average the users lose. So it's a model where their business model, it's a zero-sum game. Their win is your loss. Prediction market business models do not work like that. On a prediction market, you're charging 0.3% of volume, so traded back and forth. So there's no incentive to make as many users lose as possible. So I think that'll give the user ultimately a much nicer interaction in a world where you're trying to predict things about the future, right? And it'll help from the data collection perspective, help us really get at the truth of things more accurately. And if you know something better, if you're a real kind of analyst and you've gone into all of the details and you know a market is slightly off, you can place a big prediction and correct that market and profit for doing so. So it benefits media outlets with a revenue stream. It's not a loser-based market. It's just a volume and interaction-based market. I think it's going to give a better user experience. On the business side, I think it's going to force gaming industries to innovate their business model, right? A lot of what you see with Web3s is it's forcing a better user-centric business model to occur. Banks who today take 5 days to move your currency from one country to another country and charge you stupid fees, that's destroyed by just moving Bitcoin from A to B, right? And the easier it becomes to access Bitcoin, the more the banks have to innovate their models to provide the same benefits to the customer. I think we're going to see similar in this industry, where you're going to see an innovation of the business model that ultimately benefits the end user.
I want to go back to something that you said a little bit earlier about, liquidity providers. Can you tell us about how that will work? Like, who will be able to provide liquidity? Is that going to be, is it going to be anyone? Is there like a process that you guys are going to have? I know there's going to like probably a DeFi aspect associated with all of this, but can you tell us a little bit about how that's going to work?
Yeah, so there will be a couple of sort of major, well, I guess not traditional, but Web3 market makers who market make on the Web3 exchanges, that where deals are, we can't announce anyone yet, but deals are being agreed around major parties to help bring big liquidity into the markets. And then everyday people, anyone with a DeFi protocol or just some tokens, will be able to provide liquidity into those markets. And again, you'll be able to show up with a credit card and add liquidity if you choose that that's the way you want to engage with the prediction market, rather than actually placing predictions. So anybody who provides liquidity, if I've provided half the liquidity and you've provided the other half, we split the fees, and the fees are 0.3% of volume. So every time $10 moves through the platform, there is 3 cents that is kind of paid to those providers.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. I like that. So I want to ask you, I know we've been touching on this a little bit, but I want to ask you a little bit more directly, because we obviously know how popular of a market sports is in all of this. And with the 2024 election, we saw the rise of just an absolute new type of market on, I guess the political side of things. What do you see as kind of the next big thing that's going to draw people's attention in something like this that they're going to want to rush to take action on?
Well, obviously, we're very bullish on sports, given the partnership with Sports Illustrated. But I think you've got to look to new media. So Sports Illustrated is more traditional media, right? There's various publications that everybody's known for a long time, but new media is influencers, and the way influencers can command an audience. That's obviously where people have seen the best kind of ROI in terms of launching new products or whatever, right? Customer acquisition cost tends to be the best in that realm. So I think looking at what influencers end up doing in the prediction market space, they have super engaged audiences, and the right influencers, the content they create could be anything, right? So less about the content, more about who, but I think that's going to be the next part of this industry that blows up.
Oh yeah, that's such an interesting thing because most recently we had the, going viral with that influencer who showed his morning routine in the Saratoga Springs water, right? So I could totally see a way where people would then see something like that and they rush to the prediction markets and say, "Oh, will this impact how will this impact Saratoga Springs sales?" And then, like, you give certain predictions on that. I think that is just a very fascinating use case, and I just think it spices up just the mundane things of everyday life. So I absolutely love that you mentioned that. So, Alan, this has just been an absolutely fascinating conversation. I'm sure we could probably talk hours about this, and without going too deep into it, and you guys giving away everything that you guys have, right? But I I just want to kind of throw it to you for anything that you want to share here before we end. Where can we find out more information about Galactic Markets? Where can we follow you and get some updates? And when can we expect to start making our own predictions on your marketplace?
Absolutely. So let's say, devs never like it if you promise too early. The site's live internally, but the question is, when exactly will it launch? So I'd say within the next 4 weeks is very high probability that sipredict.com will be live, obviously subject to the partners approving as well, but it's almost there now. So not a long time until people can place their own predictions. If anybody wants to find out more about Galactic, galacticmarkets.io is the best place to do so if somebody wants to kind of run their own prediction market site or just learn a little bit more. And then obviously there's the Truth Network aspect that's important to this as well. So that's truth-network.io. And on each of those websites, there are all the social links, whatever people's favorite kind of form of engagement are. So yeah, please check it out. And thank you so much for having me here today.
Yeah, thanks again, Alan. It's been an absolute pleasure. Everyone, again, this is Galactic Markets. You can check them out, as Alan said, galacticmarkets.io, and find out more information. And definitely check out their collab with Sports Illustrated as well. I really see, a bright future with something like that. So again, congratulations to you and your team on such a big partner there. That's great. So everyone, thank you again for tuning in. This has been a masterclass with Galactic Markets. It's been a pleasure, and we'll see you for the next one.
Thank you.